Hey everyone! Welcome to another edition of Bedtime Stories, where I read one story each week to help children through the pandemic. Today we will be doing a continuation of the Hathor story from the Treasury of Egyptian Mythology book. Again, I highly recommend that you go on Amazon and search for this book because it's filled with beautiful illustrations and beautiful little stories that you can read to your children if you so choose. Now, when we last left Hathor, she was transformed into a sort of lion goddess, and when Ra told her to stop, she felt like she couldn't control that little part inside of her that wanted to just destroy. And I know how that feeling is. Sometimes when you get angry, you just can't stop being angry. But if you know how to calm yourself down after like a big blowout or something, you can better handle your mood. It took me a long time to figure that out. So, without any further ado, let's see how Hathor gets herself out of this predicament. When humans took to speaking badly of Ra, calling him a feeble old fool, Hathor rose to the task of defending him. She slew those who had said dastardly things about Ra, then went on to slay every human she passed. Ra was pleased. He stood tall and the wind swirled around him as in a great funnel up into the sky forever. He assumed yet another name now. Amun-Ra, god of victory, warlord. This is what the people of the strong town Waset, known for ferocity in war, had been calling him for years, and they had built him and his wife Mut the most splendid temple ever. Amun-Ra shouted, "On! On! People must fear him. All nations must come under his way. They must make sacrifices to him. Give up the throne? Never!" Amun-Ra would be the true father of every future pharaoh. He would from then on assume the outward appearance of the reigning pharaoh, and walk boldly into the sleeping queen's chambers and leave her perfumed and lovely, and with child. Each queen would rejoice in her love for him. All will be perfect. Feeble old fool. Ha! Amun-Ra would show them. Every pharaoh from that moment on would be the earthly embodiment of Amun-Ra himself. When they died, they'd rejoin Amun-Ra in the sky. Nothing could be more perfect. And the goddess Hathor had helped him to assure this future. She was splendid. Except, now that victory was his, Amun-Ra wanted Hathor to stop the slaughter. The sight of all that carnage turned even his stomach. But she wouldn't. Hathor hunted with the lethal speed of a lioness. Hot winds skimmed the desert, picking up sand and grinding them into people's flesh, and the people screamed, sure that these scouring, searing winds were the breath of an angry goddess. They called her Sekhmet now, the powerful one, the dread-bearer. Wrath made Sekhmet blood-crazed. She was vengeance incarnate. Death seemed attracted to her. Whenever she stopped, even for a moment, vipers clustered around and twined upward, forming writhing anklets and bracelets, increasing the tremors of the sight of her caused. She was isolated, a pride of one, yet more effective than a dozen lions. This was right. This was as it should be. These people had insulted Amun-Ra. They were slime. They deserved to perish in hideous ways, torn limb from limb, eaten alive, their shrieks cut off as her jaw clamped around their throats. This was divine justice. Let their blood feed the crops. Let it nourish the land. Let it pour. Ra watched in horror. If Sekhmet wasn't stopped, there will be no people left to serve him. What was wrong with her? He called gods and people together, and they brewed barrels and barrels of the strongest beer known to anyone. 7,000 barrels. That's a lot of beer, right? Then Ra had them grind up ochre clay and crush hibiscus petals and squash pomegranates to add red coloring and fragrance and taste. He had them mash in poppy and mandrake to make the brew even stronger, strong enough to overwhelm Sekhmet's senses. They worked through the long night. Before daylight, as Sekhmet slept, they poured this most special beer across the earth. They flooded the fields, just as the Nile did annually, but they flooded the valleys too. In the morning, Sekhmet rose, eager for the hunt, her mouth dripping with mead, her heart rock dry. People, she would devour them all. Then, oh, the dawn glinted rosy off in the new sea before her. She jumped to her feet and turned in a circle. Was this an enormous mold of blood? Had she spilled all of that in her rampage the day before? How gratifying! Sekhmet leaned over and saw her own visage mirrored in the slightly effervescent surface. Her crimson-reflected feline tongue dipped tentatively. Sweet, dense drops clung to its barbs. She dipped that tongue again. Delicious! She slurped faster. She slurped all morning, all noon, all night. Her need was satiated, and still she drank, unable to stop. Slurp, slurp. Her belly swelled till it could no more, and she swooned headfirst into the small remaining puddle. Slowly, she looked around. What was she doing here, lying in this sloshy clay? She glimpsed a movement. Over there, behind a boulder. A person had peeked out at her, then quickly hidden in fear. Whatever for? People had no reason to fear Hathor. The goddess stood up, and the lioness body that had enveloped her throughout the bloody frenzy shed away like fog dissipating before the sunbeams. Hathor walked forward, the gentle one, Ra's trusted eye. But Sekhmet existed now, the other aspect of Hathor, the fire-spitting eye of Ra, the solar lady of flame that seared everyone at midday. The Sekhmet was the abyss of all fears since the beginning of time, while Hathor was love incarnate. That duality felt natural to Sekhmet. Hathor. Together they were a balance of nature, as Ma'at preached. At the call of divine justice, Sekhmet could spring forth as lioness, ever ready to protect Egypt against enemies from within or without. But she could also appear just because she wanted to. That was the beauty of existence. Random, rogue, freak. And she wanted to now. She looked at Ra and saw him in her own way, as her own idea of the creator god. She called him Ptah, yet another identity for Ra, and she took him into the town of Ennephedj and married him. The people of Ennephedj believed Ptah rose from the watery mass of Nun and created the world in all sense of time, though he himself was immeasurable. But they said it was a separate god Ra who drove the sunlight across the sky each day. And they said it was another god, Khnum, who fashioned humans out of clay on his potter's wheel. This was fine with Sekhmet. Ptah pleased her, whatever his powers were, whatever other gods he might overlap with. Sekhmet plucked a blue lotus from the primeval sea of Nun and held it to Ptah's nose. Behold, out stepped their son Nefertem, whoever after wore on his head a blue lotus plume, with 2 plumes rising up. And now there were 3 again, Ptah, Sekhmet, and Nefertem, a triad in charge of Ennephedj. It felt right. It felt healed. And so Sekhmet willed herself to become the goddess of healing. She could banish plague. She could save the wounded. She could be as good as she wanted. But always in the back of her heart, there scrabbled a force that could destroy. Let this be a lesson to you all. Better get some coping skills fast. Well, that concludes this week's story. I hope you all give this video a like and subscribe to my channel for this channel to grow and gain more viewers. Until next time, see you next week.